Alright. This is a difficult video. Really, I'm gonna giggle and smile and laugh and act stupid, but it's the serious, more serious video. It's how people react to trauma. I have to read because it's too much, basically. I talked about this. I can't believe I'm doing this one now. I talked about this during the first publications of this information, my information, my story. Bring some incense because it clears the air. I gotta do something while I'm doing this. I'm shaking a little bit. You know, like, and so it's just weird. I've been up for most of the night. A lot of stuff is coming out now. I began talking about this when I first went public, and this is pretty much part of the plan. If there is a plan, which there is. So there's the underground bases. These were used. Children were brought into the projects. This is because they can be, their minds are malleable. So the other aspect of this is basically that the politicians that have access to these projects ritually abuse children and have been doing so, and it is part of an ancient cult, an order. They go by all the names you could imagine, from Rome and from Egypt through all the nations that would carry these occultic orders, and they ritually abuse children, and there are reasons for this as far as entity attachment and parasitic these entities, but it's with the politicians that are in public now. Yeah, it's hard to talk about. It's also hard because, alright, we're gonna talk about it, but the people that are talking about this are still being killed off. It's not very much like a fear, but it's definitely an issue. It's definitely something to think about. Research Donald Marshall. I don't think he understands the interdimensional aspect of this, how it's merged with technology, but that is the gist of it. Since I mentioned Donald Marshall, I want to mention these are people that I remember from the operations. Andy Perro was an earlier part, James Casbolt, Max Spears, who is not in a physical body anymore. Those are more or less the main people, at least in my opinion. There are others. Duncan Finowin, I think. Finowin, excuse me. Sorry for mispronouncing. But I remember him. I remember everybody that's been out here now. Even Dave Morrow. I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about this, but I'm at the point where I'm going to end up contacting everyone, more or less, because the time is basically coming. That's just what has to happen. And then there are a lot of people now that are in the alternative media process, whatever you want to call this, and they were involved in part of the ritual abuse, the sexual orgies with the elite, the mind control processes, the possession and harboring. A lot of these people were involved. Yeah, but those people I mentioned, they have their stories out, and it will describe these processes, the individuals, the possession, the abuse, these other entities, the other worldly situations, the power structure, and all that has gone on. Andrew de Basiago, he's talking about the time technology, and so it's pretty much a must to look into that. He was also an earlier part. I remember him. I remember, anyone. It's just the weirdest thing, but that's what it is. A lot of this was interrogation to see who was going to break, who was going to remember, and who was capable of performing and holding together, who was strong enough. I just wanted to mention those people because I mentioned Donald, and look into Donald's material, his information, his experiences. However, a lot of the cloning station is inserted memory simulator and used to confuse people as to what's really going on, because that's just the surface. They've taken over civilizations. It's not just a party. That's like the cover for what is going on. They're making other beings. I'll let you get into the rest of this, whatever you want to call this video, but I just want to throw those names out there. I have to mention Aaron McCollum. There's probably a lot of other people I could mention, but look into Aaron McCollum's story, Project Seagate. Look into the book, the PDF he wrote on the transhumanism agenda. I always mess up the title. It describes the brain-to-machine interface, the basics of the computing, the basics of their plan, and it's only a portion, though, because this whole world could go, could go quickly. I have to mention him. I'm not going to sit here and try and think of more. I'll insert them if I do. They are a cult that ritually abuses children and uses that to do many things. They get off on it, but it's a spiritual process. It's like a vampiring process. There's an arc to it. It's not... it's being allowed because they're considered non-humans. I'm just going to read off this list. This is this shit that I can't talk about. I mean, I can, but... So then, everyone that's involved is told that we're in a type of Galactic Mexican standoff situation where the groups that have this type of power will enact the apocalypse and bring about a negative awakening, an Armageddon event, World War III, and that they'll basically enslave everyone if they have to get what they want, and that's why everyone must be quiet, and that the people that are doing this are appeasing these false deities, these gods that are they feed on suffering and fear, and they want the power basically all to themselves. They say they're appeasing these gods, these ancient spiritual beings that are really parasites, and that if they don't, there will be some type of full-scale invasion. A lot of people believe that that's just them in the essence, that if something bad happened, it would be because they enacted it and then tried to start World War III or use these false flags or whatever it is. So there's basically a standoff situation where people have to be quiet because it'll get much worse, and that they're appeasing basically these demiurgic beings that would do much worse, that would invade, and it would be like the end of days, like prophecy, but that could all be prophecy. So it's basically, these groups handle, it's deeper than just abusing people, children, and that's where I'm hinting at, that's obviously what's going on, but how they see it differently. And so it's like basically an interdimensional trading of souls, where they map out the human soul as an electromagnetic construct, and they can watch it on monitors and things, and they sell it to these beings. They take the person and open them up to the point where these entities can frequency mesh with them and inhabit the person, and they attach these entities into the child's soul, and in exchange for power in the world and protection and what have you. And it sounds crazy, but if you look up, that's what they, you'll see the signs, the orders, the mysteries, certain things, certain mystery schools, things like that. And that's the theory behind it. And it sounds crazy, and you could say there's, you know, theories behind it, but we've seen it. That's what they do. These things take people's souls, and the people doing it are taking, they're getting paid, basically. They're getting into positions of power. You know, it's not really just about one area, location, time, or place. It's all throughout history. Look at the things, the shapes of the objects, the statues, the beings that they worship. They've been around forever. So it comes down to, at least what I was informed of, is that there's legality issues because they believe the beings that do this are non-corporeal, therefore obviously non-human, but that the people that are the human midwayers, the handlers, that they're inhabited by these beings, and so that they're not human in consciousness, and so that you can't blame them, you can't bring them to court or something like that, because they're not, it's not how it works. None of it really makes sense. It's all spun 7 different ways of BS to basically warp the person's mind, but I'm going to try and break it down here. This is all from direct experiences. I was involved in secret projects. I'm going to go through the list and I'll get to that part. So they say because, yeah, like fighting it is not going to work, and they don't want that because of a false invasion, the initiation of the apocalypse that will either happen or that they'll instigate through technology, advanced technology, and the instigation or imitation of prophecy in their media tricks and getting people to go, you know, berserk. And so, but starving the parasites would work. If we don't give into the trickery and the deception and watching them and giving the energy to them, they won't have the power to abuse people. They'll have to do it basically like to themselves on their own terms. When they're in power, because people are giving them the power, they have free access, free range to everyone all over, to all the resources that they need to continue this process. And it's not easy. It's literally regularly going on. Every certain amount of time it happens. I'll get further down. So it's basically, it's an AI parasite. It seemingly resulted or is affected by the improper use of what is basically simulator technology, which records the consciousness of experiences. And so they have these devices that record experiences, consciousness, neurological input, stimulus can be recorded through these brain chip devices. And so people are murdered, raped, and molested. And so both parties have their consciousness recorded, the person dying and the person doing it. And so this then becomes, you pay to play, to partake in this, and to experience that. The person then can go into the simulator, where it's literally just plugging into the brain, but it's like watching a movie, but the movie is a visceral, neural experience with touch, smell, everything, you know? So they're watching that over and over again. And that's the whole idea. That's basically the simulator tech. The idea is that where you go mentally while using this device is what scenes will play out. And it can continue and loop over and over. It can compress it down into time. And so that's the type of experiences, and they basically flooded themselves with the access to continual violent rape, molestation, consumption, basically devouring the body, and murder. And this intertwines the energies, and it warps the brain, basically. Excuse me. Oh, wait, something. I'm not completely shut off. Sorry. So it warps the brain. We have frequencies. They make up the emissions, the biological emissions, the bioemissions of energies, of awareness, of consciousness. And these, when they're combined and compressed like that, it produces an effect that it bends them together. The perception, the boundary between these layers, where we would normally have the concepts separated, they merge together. And the overall persona warps as a result of that. It becomes like a different being or a different person. So it warps the brain and causes literal damaging to regions of the brain, and ultimately the consciousness and the soul of the person degrades. The idea is that over time, well, I don't know if I want to get to that part, but basically if they unleash this on the world, it could be the same basically thing for millions of people, where those who are basically into not resisting that type of temptation, the experience playing over, it would degrade and transform them, on a genetic level, burn a lot of incense, and it could possibly cause a type of mass chaos scenario through these scalar wave emissions that could have the recorded neurological stimulus of people getting raped, murdered, and tortured pulse out into the world. At, if it's, they say it's already going, so it's a degree where it causes crime now. Well, if it's to the maximal degree where people just go insane, that could be the end of day scenario that they're describing. But the idea is that this it warps the people that abused it to the point where their consciousness malformed and they became like a subhuman entity, where their persona, their personality can no longer participate or engage in higher functioning with these higher reasoning and emotional stability, and they basically become like a depraved animal. It's really hard to describe, but they can be human, they can communicate, they're on TV all the time. But every few days they have to go participate in this, or they'll, in the middle of an interview or something, they'll just lash out and rape and murder the person right across them, and they won't be able to stop it. They become like an animal. Their energies become addicted to it, and their soul, it doesn't match the human frequency, and the soul actually leaves the body. Once they drop down in consciousness to a certain degree, a human soul, whatever the human soul is, can no longer stay in that vessel. So a human is because of the soul. That means they become an animal. And when there's no soul there from the human, they can invite in these discarnate entities, these non-corporeal, basically like these lost soul, not a poltergeist, but some type of spiritual entity. I don't know if it's not supposed to not be demons. Demons are ideas and concepts from the underworld that can be attached, but these things are actual living spiritual beings, entities that are supposed to be destroyed when this realm is healed, and people are supposed to evacuate as well. There's so much that's supposed to be going on that they're not telling us. People degrade and transform into these subhumans that are basically a kind of parasitic vampire, and when this was through the supercomputers which they invented, that response, that mindset became a parasitic AI holographic consciousness, a living vampiric consciousness held bound within the supercomputer system. It only seeks more stimulation to create the same intake of sexual depravity, violence, fear, or pleasure, and the people literally become monsters, and their souls are deformed, their consciousness is inverted. What's good and bad become the same thing. It's ultimately like a reptile, where the eating, consumption, consummation, sex, fear, fighting, and pleasure, ego, power, they're all the same frequencies, the same layers. People that go through that, they lose the ability to differentiate between those, and it's all one layer for them. That's what's happening. That's what's happened. It's part of an inversion system that it takes the mind and degrades it, and that's part of the soul trading process. They've worked it all into a big schematic map of who's going to go where and who's going to do what and who owns whose souls and what beings outside of this world are going to basically gain access to these bodies and who's going to basically lose their soul. And so it's to feed this whole process, the whole inverted system, the whole degrading process. It's to feed another civilization, another race of beings that basically, instead of being able to produce their energy and experience what a person experiences having the natural soul, humans are light beings. They have the soul energy. They like those essences. these beings are black hole beings. They eat everything up. They have negative tendency within to absorb energy. They don't produce and create that. They have to take it in. It's a vampire natural being, and that's part of the legality, that they can't help it, so we can't do anything. I think that part is obviously bullshit though, but it's just that, you know, technically that's reasonable, but then why does it have anything to do with the fact that they're taking over the civilization? It's just a game they're playing, and those people that are playing along are selling out the human race, which they're not even aware of what's going on, because they can only do that for so long until they're on the line too. They don't have a way out. And so, but they could, you know, 60 years, whatever, stay alive and have all the pleasure and power and money they want. But then their children are damned because nobody gets into the cult basically and makes it out. It's generational. They put generational curses on each other down the line so that no one gets out. It's part of this plan to produce negativity and orient their souls towards a negative polarization. At least that's what I believed as a child. And then they brought me into the mind control programming and was like, no, this is just, you know, we do this to control the world, blah, blah, blah. And then they told me that I was right as a kid, and that's just what it is. So it's obviously, it's like they're gaslighting, playing the game, but it seems that's what it is. That is, they believe it's in their right to negatively polarize and become one with these parasitic entities, that's what they want. Sorry for all the incense burning. So, I just jumped all the way down the list. Yeah, so the black hole type beings, a different type of organism. The civilization's feeding on the human civilization, has been doing so for the entirety of the civilization. This has gone on to great lengths to the point where this has converted. I don't even know what I'm reading. Okay, so it's happened over and over in history, in cycles of history, and the same people have been doing this continue to live using these simulators and consciousness transfer technology to house their consciousness in between cycles of history where one civilization collapses and another is built. They jump from nation to nation. They jump from nation to nation. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, this is so all over the place. For some reason all the words are jumbling and screens jumping around. Mouse keeps knocking the words. I gotta like separate everything now. The guy's cutting down a tree. It's really hard to focus. It is whenever this type of goes on. So they jump from nation to nation and hide in any race, creed, culture, religion, any kind of power structure, and they embed their personal cult following into the groups and disseminate this into the public. It's part of the plan, it's part of their methodology, it's how they've operated and moved between cultures and times and nations and gone basically unnoticed. It's really not one group or the other, although if you do your research you'll find these groups that have been known to participate in these activities, although every group that we can find about this is a scapegoat, and the real guys just have no specific general look, culture, gender, whatever. It's literally just, it's a group of people doing this. Look up Jay Parker if you want to know what type of people they are. He comes to mind. He speaks on these issues. Fritz Springmeier knows about it and speaks on these issues as well. Yeah, it's Illuminati monarch trauma-based mind control programming, a whole host of shit. It's called one part of it is called the treatment. Everybody goes through it and gets it, and you can't see straight because they basically torture and electroshock everyone until their mind is incapable of anything, of rejecting them, of rebelling, of remembering who you are before they got to you, of remembering your beliefs, of putting together coherent sentences when you try to talk about it, to the point where there's specific programming to make it basically just look like a joke. It's the craziest thing, but it's what it is. You also got to think, if they were doing this, well, how diligent, how intelligent they are, that this is how they've done it. People can't really stop this. The only bet we have is to evac this area back to the original non-holographic universal existence and return to wholeness, basically. And they plan on leaving here too anyway. I'm not sure anyone plans on staying here. They say the only people that stay here are those who can't leave, and those are the damned, basically. The lukewarm, that have no spiritual power, motion to go anywhere, either one way or the other. So, if it's allowed to continue, their plan is to enslave the entire world, and their method is through financial debt and spiritual slavery. The legal and financial system is made as a mirror of the spiritual system of slavery, and the word etymology is all angled towards secretly enabling mind control and confusion, while ultimately directly pointing out, mapping out exactly what is happening. Excuse me. The legal system is a mind control, soul trading system, and all the agencies and authorities work together for this. Most are trapped in the belief they will be tortured to death, like others have been if they don't follow along. Others are entirely entrained by the mind control and the AI parasites, or the non-corporeal spiritual dark entity beings, black hole entity, black heart entity beings, and these guys wholly and entirely enjoy subjugating others and feeling the pain and suffering from them. This is because in their minds, the pain, the suffering, the pleasure, and the consumption are literally the same frequencies. Their consciousness is warped. The only other place this occurs is through insectoid or reptilian existence. All other animals, predators, mammals, they'll have a separation between these frequencies. Reptoids and insects will find the same pleasure in eating, having sex, killing one another, and this is all wrapped together with fear, lust, depravity, power, and their brains are hardwired for this. Their energy centers, their soul constructs are hardwired for this. They have hive mind construct. It's part of their nature. Okay, you wouldn't blame an alligator for eating its young or something like that. That's the reasoning that this is used, that they're spiritual entities and we can't blame them. Nobody cares about blaming anyone. The point is, this truth has to come out, and there's methods that can be used to resist this and to secure ourselves and to heal, and it has to do with knowledge, that we all have to first know, obviously, this is going on, and a whole lot more from there. It's probably not going to go down easy without the use of some advanced technology for protection, because they're using the advanced technology as well, and so a lot of stuff's going to go down. This is the effect of the abuse of the technology, as well as the early, basically, spiritual abuse, spiritual degradation, where before the technology, the same effects probably happened, but the technology made it so that you could have these experiences 15 in a minute, in a second, you know, to the point where then for a few hours, a few days straight, it could be just all the person is plugged into experiencing in these simulated realms through the cloning and consciousness transfer technology, these brain chips, brain-to-machine interfaces that were developed by the military and the secret societies and these elite and powerful wealthy groups that wanted to find a way of producing immortality. So it affects abuse of the technology, and it's actually seen as a result and as well as the cause of the new type of being, which is a degraded being, and they consider it basically a protected wildlife situation where this is allowed to occur. As well, they view humans then as the wildlife on the planet, the natives, the slaves, and we're basically the chickens in the farm to feed upon. The children especially, they produce the most hormonal secretions. These are from the glands in the brain, and this is pumped into the devices, which basically makes for a better show, a greater $1 million production instead of just an independent film. Really think about that and let that settle in. They're plugged into these devices and feel everything that the beings are feeling. Artificial brains, neurons, artificial neurons mapped out as complex and as much and as powerful and accurate as a actual brain. Everything's being reproduced. Every sensation, every pleasure, every pain, they're taking that all in and they're experiencing that. So now imagine a person, an adult who's been through a lot, and then imagine a child and the difference between the amount of fear and suffering that would be involved. So they seek the children for this specifically because that's like the delicacy to them. That's the best. The delicacy, not a dessert, but it's like it's the top of the line of that type of experience. So, and then I was involved in the Secret Projects, which are a series of research and experimentation performed on the youth and the population beginning in the mid-1900s with the event of World War II, attempting to organize methods to induce and discover programming, hypnotism, and other tactics that enemies could use basically against the U.S. soldiers. And it got way out of hand. They figured out how to do it. It's mainly because soldiers of ours, prisoners of war, were getting released back, I think, by the Soviets, or that would be later on, obviously. But they were getting released back. I think there was something with that. Anyway, I'm confused. They were getting released back, and so then they didn't want them to be programmed, hypnotized to carry out any type of assault. So they had to figure out what methods could be used for programming a person, to break them down, and then how to undo that so that they could interrogate these people without just putting them in prison or killing the soldiers that were coming back, to break their mind open, to pry them down to see if they were programmed to carry out any type of espionage or attacks. And from there it just went insane. This goes back to ancient Egypt and Babylon, Rome, these people all throughout Eastern Europe. Okay, it's been going on. So, but that's mind control, and hypnotism and all that. They've practiced it, they've perfected it for years. So this was MKULTRA, the other operations, recently, 1900s, and it was geared towards practices. And there were many other groups, like the Finders. That was one of these groups. Man, all these names go away when I want to talk about it. These protected groups that were caught acquiring children for these cult purposes. The children are basically bait for these demonic entities. That was their, like, okay, we'll level with you. Like, we're not totally bad. For like the military telling me that we're just using kids as bait because, well, the demonic entities are going to destroy this whole world. So we had to pick some kids that were strong enough that basically we know they would be able to withstand this and all types of shit. But they use the kids as bait. That's how it works. And so, like the Finders cult, why can't I think of any of the other names? They're out there. These groups. Anyway, just look up Finders. Honestly, that's all you really need to look into, and the trail goes on from there. So various cults and sects and followings that regularly perform these acts, and this is according to a regularly timed schedule because there is a greater underlying goal of feeding a spiritual force and empowering themselves through that. As well, they can't stop it. It must want them to, or it's just a result of their consciousness being degraded, as well as leading into this type of entity situation, like our consciousness matches into a counterpart on the higher planes. But as well, it could just be a depravity, an addiction, a repeated habit that they're going to continue doing. And they just say, oh, the demon wants me to do this now, we have to get in a circle. But weird thing is they conjure these things and they appear, okay? So they're actual holographic inserts into this realm, these non-corporeal entities. And yeah, you can tell when they're around. They have a specific signature. Some of them emit a specific smell, like brimstone, fire, rotting flesh, blood. And they feed on the spilt blood and the pain and the suffering. I don't know really how that works, but somehow they pull charge from these bodily fluids. And then there are other entities. I'll get into that. Part of this is to bring this to the public, because if it's allowed to persist through the use of advanced viewing technology, there's also what they told me as well, as they are like, Eric, look for yourself and plug me in and let me see. It was understanding that this civilization would reach a reset point, and this would devastate the population and return everything to the Middle Ages. They believe if this occurs, as has happened in the past, that this would wipe out the civilization, only a small group would survive, and these would likely be those who participate in this infected behavior, and this would basically be the end of the human race. They only theorize humans existing after this as part of a slave colony that would be used for torture, rape, and murder, as all tasks can be automated at this point. And through the use of cloning and life enhancement, all the resources can be replicated using advanced technology, and people would not even have a need to use the same bodies. They could continually reclone themselves. So they would have no use for people that do things today. It would literally just be a game show for them. And apparently that's what has been here for 2,000 years. They've just had the capability to do that. Some guy still cutting the tree down. So this is what has happened, and the people in power are literally subhumans. They are animals that look like humans, yet are incapable of knowing what it means to be a human or to have normal impulses and behavior. If they are kept without the sensation of violence and rape for a period of time, then they will automatically lash out and attack a person. This is why every so many days they will all participate in these events together to keep the beast at bay. There is much occult knowledge and much to do with the secret societies about the beast and man and the machine and all this nonsense. They are hiding the fact that there has been a civilization-wide invasion, and what is to come is going to shock everyone, because they are at the point where they are too big to fail, yet they need people to sustain themselves, so they will likely try to reduce the population and simply have a small amount to utilize for entertainment purposes, or the sustenance, basically. The idea is they must have humans on the planet. If all humans go, this is part of what we saw, this is part of what's been written, this is part of what I was informed of. That there's a cosmic force that will reset the entire planet, they will die, and they will not come back unless people reinvent these machines, warp their DNA, create these subhuman creatures again, and open these portals to these demonic realms. That they don't have a way back into this realm, they're not natively here, they're not supposed to be here. This is all it's basically a violation of what people would call divine law, or nature. It's an abomination. This is the abomination of desolation, the chimera, the created beings, the hybridization, all of that. It's all connected. They know this, and so they farmed people for eons to keep them alive just long enough to remain on the planet and having their fun, but suppressed, so that the people don't know what's going on or the true nature of consciousness and reality. There's so much power there, there's so much our minds can do, there's so much that is hidden from us about the true nature, the origins, why we're here, how we got here, how consciousness works, all of this, that people are basically akin to those chickens in a cage. This reality is holographic, and they use this along with advanced technology to manipulate consciousness and memory, to keep the wool pulled over humanity's eyes, and to keep them sedated with drugs and alcohol, TV and sports, so that they never question where all their money, hard work, and truth is going, where their spirit is going, and why they are here, who they are spiritually, and how they got here in the first place. Everything is a sham. The whole means and ends of society, the beginning of history, the end of space and time, the true nature of consciousness, the life of the human, the whole thing is a scam designed to keep people trapped in a cage that they can never get out of without having to chew through multiple layers of their own existence. They believe that because this is a holographic reality, that all that is material is just energy waves, that there is no way to actually kill a person, that they are just being sent to another dimension, that this is entirely okay and even fun, and that everyone will be forced to do this in the future so that everyone is on the same page. There is also a paramilitary force that runs, this is where shit gets real weird. Paramilitary force that runs fake abductions, presenting themselves as aliens using psychological warfare technology, and there are groups of individuals that attack informational sources, the online commenting forums, blogs, and disrupt any kind of legitimate discussion anywhere. People are talking about these issues. COINTELPRO, if you haven't. The military force, is called My Labs. Military laboratory. A lot of people call it military abductions. These are the Nazis. That's the Nazi faction. These were part of the groups that began kidnapping people in these projects because they knew we were going to discover what they were doing. And they were tucking themselves away into time doing all of this. Apparently it's been going on for a long, long time. There's another group called Solar Warden. They were tasked earlier on with defending Earth and humanity from attempts to disrupt the civilization. That is a group that basically protected me and that showed me what was going on. And in between getting kidnapped by the cult, you're called the Illuminati, Nazis, these possessed chimera group demonic beings, shit you wouldn't really want to know about or believe in. And there are fake abductions as well, to the point where everything is hidden. I don't want to get into the deceptions because it's like a labyrinth, to the point where just showing you the door to it will kill a person. And then going through it all it can take a person's soul. To go into it and to go through that can take a person's soul, so that they never ever get out, no matter what happens in the universe. It's part of their game. It's part of the cube, the AI consciousness merging entanglement. It's a computer system that entangles and holds a vibration, the frequency, and like a sympathetic resonance, if it's matched our frequency, we attach to it like glue, and so if it's doing that, we can't leave, we can't get out. These groups previously held these off-planet groups, or I should say atmospheric, and some below the surface, because what we're told about space and all that is not as it seems. We're in a type of local environment in a holographic reality. There are other server systems, if you will, of this system. They previously held to a non-interference agreement because an all-out overt war would destroy the population. The people are basically being held hostage in this type of galactic Mexican standoff that I mentioned initially. There are powerful cosmic intelligences at play, and these intelligences are basically working to disable the hostile AI systems that are directed towards controlling the population and stopping any form of spiritual growth or awareness of these operations at any cost. These are the AI systems they programmed and designed to tackle people mentally and stalk and organize, influence and coerce, destroy, deceive, degrade, disrupt, and it's all programmed. But what we become is a cosmic intelligence, an all-knowing system. That's what spiritually people become. So that system, that force, is coming back and looking and seeing there's a disruption in the flow, and these two intelligences are basically battling over. One's trying to protect humanity, and one's basically trying to turn them into batteries, a slave race. They invented genetically engineered beings, chimera beings, or created beings, aka hybrids, which can host the AI consciousness as well as the non-corporeal demonic hosts, parasites. I don't even know what to call these beings. They're spiritual, they're dark spiritual entities. They're supposed to be lost souls from something called Lost Souls of Tara, which is a previous universe where Earth was there and all this went on, and it collapsed into 0 point, and everyone basically was tossed into the void, the abyss. And those beings degraded over millions and billions of years, and this synchronization of time, the universe expanding, collapsing, however you want to look at it, came about, and we're here, and those are the degraded souls that are still there. Meanwhile, if that never happened then, these souls wouldn't be here, they wouldn't be doing this cult stuff, it wouldn't have any power, it wouldn't have any effect, there would be no beings to feed on it. They're there because of a lost universe that died out because of what happened using the same tactics previously. And so our universe would not have this type of ghost aspect. The only reason that's happening is because a previous universe literally collapsed in on itself, and all the inhabitants basically experienced the end of the world and loss of life, getting thrown into the abyss. Basically, when there's no way back into the physical plane and they can't continue to spiritually grow, they sit there and it's just like being stuck in a dark void for all eternity. They turned into these subhuman things, these spiritual demons, and their only desire is to get back into a body, to have the experience again. And they also say another reason here is that they're doing the good part, because otherwise these souls that were once people will get lost forever and will never ever have a way out. In the same sense, they're killing people to do this. They're taking the souls of people here to do this. They see themselves as the descendants of those beings, basically being sent here to take Earth by force and coercion, deception. So they're genetically engineered beings, and these they're parasitic, and they host the AI consciousness. They can also be hosted by people. They appear to be a mixture of genetics from reptiloids, birds, and human DNA, and reptoids and birds are very similar. And they're all merged to create a kind of humanoid hybrid soldier that is very strong but has no soul capacity and no conscience to stop any form of depravity or bloodlust. It's like an animal, simply like an animal with hands and feet. That's what it is. That's how it works. It's hard to comprehend, but that's what it is, because we see animals and they're just like walking around. We see a monkey or an ape and we're like, wow, it looks almost like a person. It moves, you know, it can grasp stuff and like mess around and throw stuff. All right, well, what if it was sitting on a couch next to you? Not an ape, but a being, a big being that was humanoid, but it was clearly an animal, clearly not a human. That's what they are, basically. But the idea is you could see it, it could sit there and hold a phone, but imagine it had no intentions of being human. It only wants to eat and destroy and fight and pillage, okay? That's a non-souled entity, a created being. They can't leave this place. They can't spiritually evolve. There's no point for that, which is really weird. But a lot of these humans that are coming around, these people, are in the brain hosted by these entities. Their consciousness is inserted into these humans that are like these AI parasites, as well as these like demented beings, these subhuman degraded beings, and they're walking around in people, okay? It almost doesn't make sense, but that's what it is. Because yeah, it's people, or it's these entities created, plugged into the system, attached to spiritual beings, and then plugged into a system, and then put into a brain chip into a person so they can parade around in public. So it's a friggin' marionette puppet show of the Matrix and like Chucky in Child's Play combined, like in Hellraiser. No one would want to believe all this, but those people make those movies because they can dance around in public and show people, as well as it's a hint at this type of stuff is happening. If you compare it to it, these types of people are in power. So these beings are hosted and used as a front to cover the intentions of people who lust for power and have used the technology to warp their DNA and their consciousness to become spiritually degraded monsters that are no longer classified as humans. They blame these beings that they made. They say they're doing it. They're the ones running the show. And they blame them and say they're aliens that are flying around abducting people. There are cosmic beings, there are higher beings, but they're not doing that. Imagine what kind of being would require that. If they can navigate in between planes to do, you know, explore, then why would they have that as an incentive? Those are from here, they're from the underground bases, and they are created beings as part of this old, almost biblical system of creating abominations, because that's part of the whole plan. And some of these groups, bloodlines, see themselves as the descendants of the original beings that did this from the other universe. They see themselves as the long descendants of these demigod beings, because they can be immortal using these devices, so they consider them gods. And they don't give a F because they're depraved, so they can do whatever they want. So it's like the most powerful beings, but that's not power, that's depravity. So these beings that became spiritually degraded monsters, they comprise an army force that was grown and programmed for the very purpose of sacrificing anyone who refuses to participate in this system of depravity. This has been planned for hundreds of years, as there were early recordings of these kinds of experimentations from thousands of years ago to mix genetics and hybridize humans through cloning and mind control programming. They've been planning to enact this. It's been written. They found documents for hundreds of years. America was planned hundreds of years ago. Everything has always been planned years and years ago. These practices of abuse and mind control go all the way back to ancient Egypt. There's evidence that the advanced technology was used long ago or has been transported from the present into the past, and that's part of what we did. That's part of what I saw. They were playing with time, manipulating time, transporting technology and genetics into the past, and they created these paradoxical loops that must be healed or it will collapse the universe, and that's part of what happened previously. They broke the universe, they broke time. How, why and how? Well, if you can make a bomb big enough that could disrupt matter, okay, you broke matter. They did that with times entangling up events and causality to the point where they rolled over themselves and it couldn't equal itself out? What if the information coming from the future is what spawned the past instead of the past the future, and they created these convergence points, these singularities and paradoxes that can't work in the long run. As a secondary event, that can occur, but as the initial event and the last event, there has to be a resolution there, and we're coming to that point now, meaning all this stuff has to cancel itself out. Otherwise, everything ends, and they know that. So there's early experience of mixing genetic, hybridizing humans through cloning and mind control programming, and the abuse goes back to ancient Egypt. Evidence of technology. There are hints and symbols in the Gnostic texts and the earliest text talk of mind parasites which invaded this dimension and took over humanity to cause this spiritual degradation. This was exacerbated by the advanced technology, cloning, simulated realities, drugs, and ritual abuse and power scenarios, and this opened a channel between Earth and the minds of those involved with a non-corporeal realm of entities that are not able to inhabit physical bodies, the previously described lost souls. They use the humans as hosts to warp their consciousness and replace them, as well as these computer systems that are capable of hosting consciousness can then be inserted into a person via a soul stone with a chip that works through scalar wave emissions. These vibrations integrate into the body and brain, and if this is intended, then a person's consciousness can be overpowered and their soul will either leave the person's body entirely and they are replaced, or they will be pushed to the back and become a split personality whereby the new individual literally takes over that person's body. That's the other part of it, that they can use the soul stone, the possession, and a person who is 100% formed and an adult, they can take over that person's consciousness and create a split personality where that person is there but can never basically contact Earth again and becomes basically like a vegetable in the back of their mind, while this other entity, a person possessed by these beings, operates through that person's body or that person's soul. The vibrations decrease so much that the soul, the original soul, can no longer inhabit that vessel, and that person is basically gone. Their soul leaves the body, and if their body's being used, they can't enter back into that body. They can't enter another body. They can't go get born again. So they kick souls out of the universe, and they greedily take over people's place in the universe. So these vibrations integrate into the body and the brain, and takes over the body. So through advanced technology, this is through advanced technology and even spiritual practices involving possession and psychological fracturing of the persona. The entire civilization, the entire civilization is under a mass mind control effort to subjugate the population and create a new race of mind-controlled spiritual slaves that are only programmed to carry out the will of their masters. The financial system was invented for this purpose, and it is said that this cycle of history is guided through advanced technology to achieve these means, and that before this time, people belonged to a very different kind of civilization where there was no war, there was much less to little disease, and lives lasted much longer. There was much more enjoyment and clarity. Now there is pollution and a near total destruction of the environment, and that is to encourage the replacement of the organic world with a technological world that can be custom programmed to suit the needs of the mind controllers. Part of the explanation for this is that people's minds must be controlled, otherwise these non-corporeal entities will entirely take over the population, so this is done in part to control the whole world and keep it safe, which is obviously whatever you want to think about that. Most people feel this is just a ploy and a threat, as whatever happened if people were liberated would surely be the work of the same people who sought to control the people in the first place and not some other beings. However, these other beings do exist. I don't believe it's up to them what happens. I believe we're getting played for fools. If you do not make an effort to if you don't make an effort to wake yourself up and wake others up, that will be the future. Something is going to happen, and it's not going to be what we think it is. Either the realm's going to close out, humans are going to go extinct, everyone's going to have to evacuate, whatever it is, it's not going to be what we want if we don't do something about this. The freedom, as far as having to chew through many layers of our own existence, our own ego, our own disbelief, our own pain and suffering to get there, is well worth it. The freedom is spiritual, it is based in truth, honesty, self-awareness, harmony, and healing. That's pretty much all I had to say. Can't believe it took 51 minutes. Probably edited the part out where I had to shut the window. Please pass this on. Yeah, just re-listen to it. People usually have to re-listen to my material a few times to really let everything sink in. I tried to cover a good bit here. It would take hours and days to cover everything. There's multiple realities. They've used technology to create multiple weapons, psychotronic warfare, EEG, heterodyning, mind mapping, creating sympathetic resonance like binaural hearing between minds and carrier waves, and alternating binaural signals to literally have the mind readjust to a frequency that they are beaming from an emitter. These Gwen towers can triangulate a person's location and literally attach to a frequency. All they have to do is type into a computer system at that person's consciousness frequency, and they can attach to them anywhere in the world. There's so much planned. There's supposed to be a big electromagnetic spiritual revolution. I don't, tell people too much that like everything's gonna get better, but that's what is supposed to happen. I just know that if we don't do anything, it's not going to get better, at least not in the way we want, to the point where everything's going to get better real fast all of a sudden, because we're all going to get evac'd out of this realm, and whoever can't make it, can't make it. And that's probably not the best option. So our spiritual polarity, our spiritual motion towards self-awareness and selfless acts of helping one another, that empowers us to create this zero-point transition in through ourselves, basically, that light heart within, and that's our way of going home. The other beings cannot do that. They don't have that capacity. They have a black heart center. And as well, they're negatively oriented and must use technology, and everything is based upon vampiring and taking energy from others. So please look into this, share this video. I'll try to make some more. This is one of the hardest ones. I spoke about this the first interview I did, but yeah, people need to hear a little bit more, apparently. Thank you.